So TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 12th of January. I think I've resolved my TS issues, and so we're back at it. All right, bulls continue to triumph here as we still haven't reached 50%, and we're still at the upside of the range that we've been in. Pretty strong move from Magenta, MBI. The white has been leading, but as long as that Magenta did not cross back below, we consider it to be just softness until we get a pivot lower. And in this particular case, the white has pivoted lower, so uh, the bulls have won out, and it's been a strong rise of shakeout from where we were in the negative. We were just waiting for that orange dip, which took place the other day, um, really confirming, well, more that long-term buyers were really in control of it. I mean, it's been a steady rise. We're now above the negative 7.5 with the red DOC at the negative 5.8 range. So there's been plenty of strength. And again, shorts still below zero line. So they just haven't been active at all. But getting pretty lofty there. We're at 48 for Magenta. Not likely to stay that elevated. But even if it comes down, as long as it's staying above the 33, you're still upward biased for the long side. From an NQ standpoint, considerably weaker, still only almost approaching its 38%. And that's just been the reflection of the NASDAQ in general and tech. And there's just a lot of concern as to what their performance will be. I mean, we've already seen Apple and them making reductions in production and things like that. So there's an expectation for softness coming into this first quarter. And we'll see how it continues to play out. There's been enough mixed signals that really we're just sort of treading water at this particular stage. Treasuries, they had been rising, meaning the yield had been dropping, in this idea that obviously that weakness was going to force the Fed to pivot. Something I'm not really subscribed to because they really don't have any reason to have to make a change. So we got a little bit of a pullback, but still, I think considerably overvalued for where it is. Oil, only in the 75 range. As long as it stays below that 80, and the longer it goes like that, the easier it is to absorb within the space. When we were in those peaks over 100, um, it was real problematic as far as where things would go. So the easing off has made a significant difference, I think, as far as the economic health. I've said gold is going to continue to take off, and no reason why it's going to stop as long as you see deficits and everything else. And there's been a huge amount of central bank buying from all sides of the world, and that differential between paper gold and real gold really was going to have to flesh itself out, and obviously the real market is really starting to drive price. The euro continuing its press. We see no reason why that would change once the Fed decided to provide the liquidity that it needed for energy. And surprisingly, it's been warm enough in Europe that they've really, the sanctions and the reduction from Russian oil and that hasn't really been a major factor because they've been able to sustain with the levels that they have in the imports. So it's been enough. And it's been good news for the EU, but that doesn't change fundamentally the difficulties the EU. But if the U.S. economy is considered to be faltering, that supports the EU. Bitcoin still hovering right around the 50%, almost identical to the overall market reading. I think it's a healthy sign as we've seen in this last year. It's tracked pretty decent. I mean, obviously the decline was far greater than we saw in the overall market, but a lot of that had to do with the issues related to fraud and uh, mishandling and some of the pitfalls that come with the crypto space. But we talked about this right here when we were just breaking out from the magenta that would be a slow ebb, that there was still uh, better potential for being in crypto, given the decline that it had suffered. Sort of like getting a second chance at it. ETH pretty much identical, a little bit ahead of the curve with already having pivoted on the magenta, and the NBI white had already been fading. And that was a strong green crossover that led to that initial, not quite the stellar moves that they used to have, but I think that's more responsible because that's kind of what you would expect from a more of a currency related. I mean, some of the moves we saw in the euro and other currencies were pretty dramatic. So the cryptos haven't been as bad. From an ES standpoint, once the short turnaround was closed out, the buy signals came in and moved up nicely, still trying to work its way back up to that 39.73 previous peak high. That'll be a critical one because at that point you don't want to see uh, breakdown of that MBI magenta because that would indicate a relative double top there on a 50K chart. That would be a powerful thing to watch for. Intraday from 5K, we can scroll back a little bit to get the early part of the action. Started off fairly soft. It was pretty benign, approaching that 3,900. Plenty of support right at that previous 93 algo. They were pretty tight right in that range, and so once you had support over that, it was pretty healthy. Came back to the top side one at the 3,900, and then from there it was pretty clean sailing. Simple ABC move, and once it got to the peaks, never really let up. And you can see even in post-market taking advantage of that above the 38 levels. So that becomes the next support area at this particular stage. So thankfully, got the charts back up and able to get you the latest info that's going on. But overall, things seem to be moving along fairly decently as far as trade goes. Markets looking for good news. I think that a lot of the bad has been priced in, so there's more optimism. And something we talked about at the beginning of the year, the best side of the trade would be, the counter to the negative, and looking for capturing too many people position one side. And again, that's always the case. Every time you get too many people focused on one direction, that's usually the opposite direction the market's going to go. And that's simply because you can take advantage of the overexposure in one area. And so in this particular case, not a whole lot of shorts to work with, but then, the bulls really needed to come up with just purchasing. And, of course, there's been a question about buybacks and whether or not that would be significant enough. And a lot of money's been allocated for it. It's got to go somewhere. And it's just a matter of them picking the timing. And for us, it's easy to see because we just can join along with them. As always, though, look for me on Skype chat. Trade well. Talk again later.